Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/supportbuddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our group learning program, and we're studying Chapter 9 of this book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. In Chapter 9, you're going to be learning what is Kamma and how does it affect me. This is a natural law that you're awakening to in terms of learning the teachings of the Buddha and getting to enlightenment. You would need to know this natural law. And this is the main natural law that you're awakening to. When we talk about awakening to the natural laws of existence, this is the primary natural law that the Buddha is teaching you. I'm going to help you to demystify this today so that you can understand this natural law. We're going to be talking about 4 different types of Kamma. We're going to be talking about how to eliminate your Kamma and helping you to understand the laws of society and how that factors in. So I'd like to welcome all of you, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly, and at the same time invite you to join us for meditation, because we start each class with meditation. I'm going to start with doing some chanting to ease us into the meditation, understanding that this isn't a rite, a ritual, or a ceremony or worship, but this helps to ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. Then I'm going to be guiding you in the meditation for about 5 minutes or so. But then there's going to be this period of time where it's just quiet and we're meditating together. Then we're going to come out of the meditation with some more chanting. And then that's where I'll start today's class today, where I'll be helping you to understand what is Kamma and how does it affect me. So if you'd like to join for meditation, you might take a position either seated, lying, or standing. There's also a walking position, but that doesn't usually work out so well for online learning. So usually seated position is what someone might use for getting started on the path to enlightenment. So sit however you're comfortable. Some people sit on the floor, in a chair, on a wheelchair, on a bench or sofa, or anything like this. And as I mentioned, I'm going to start with the chanting, which you're welcome to join in on, and then I'll come back in with the guidance to be able to help you understand how to actually meditate while we're meditating together. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Bhutang Mahakavanang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakawa อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตูอนุเตโรปุริสาดามะสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภาควาติ Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธภะคะวาโอตังมหาคะวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมะคะวะตาธัมโมธัมมังนะมัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนภะคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสภะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสคาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังโอโตภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to all of you, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly. As I mentioned, today is our group learning program, and we're in Volume 1, Chapter 9, which is titled, What is Kamma and How Does It Affect Me? In this chapter, you're going to be learning about the natural law of Kamma, but we could really say that in the entire program of learning the teachings of the Buddha, whether you're attending a course or a retreat or any type of program or reading any kind of book, what it would be that you're actually learning and growing and developing to understand is the natural law of Kamma. There's other natural laws as well that you need to learn and understand, but this is the main natural law that you would need to be able to awaken to in order to be able to make your way to enlightenment. This natural law is something that you're affecting you, whether you're aware of it or not. And by you awakening to this natural law, you'll be able to learn it, be able to understand it, and be able to practice in such a way that you're making wiser and wiser and wiser and wiser decisions. And as you're making these wise decisions, you're going to be experiencing only wholesome results or wholesome Kamma. But when you're making unwise decisions, you're going to be experiencing unwholesome results or unwholesome Kamma. Now, some of you guys may have heard this referred to as the natural law of karma, but for me, I use this word Kamma because in the original teachings of the Buddha, which are in the Pali language, this is the word that's actually being used, is the word Kamma, where the word karma comes from the Sanskrit language. So people who are studying through the Sanskrit language, anything related to these kinds of teachings, they might be using that particular word. If this translated to just one English word, I would use it because it would be much easier for everyone to understand. You're going to be learning about what this is today in today's class because I'm going to be teaching you about 4 different types of Kamma: wholesome Kamma and unwholesome Kamma, new kamma and old kamma. I'm going to be explaining to you not only about what these types of kamma are, but how to extinguish your unwholesome kamma so that by the time you get to enlightenment, you're only experiencing wholesome kamma. Now, sometimes in life, when we're experiencing day-to-day life, you might be experiencing unwholesome things in your day-to-day life. As you're experiencing life, you're experiencing things that you probably would rather not occur. And if you're experiencing these things, one of the things that people think is they might think that, oh, this is good luck or bad luck, or this is destiny or fate, or some people blame other people for what it is that they're experiencing, or some people think that there's a being that's controlling the world and controlling what you're experiencing, and now you're being punished or you're being rewarded. If you subscribe to this type of thinking, then basically you're locked in and you're not going to be able to actually make any progress in life because your life is already determined. It's good luck or bad luck. It's destiny or fate, or there's some being that's controlling what you experience, or it's everybody else that's contributing to what it is that you're experiencing in life. And in all these situations, you can't do anything to control any aspect of your life or change any other aspect of your life. So this is really a defeating perspective that isn't going to allow you to be able to now learn wisdom, make different decisions, and experience different results in your life. Because one of the beauties about understanding the natural law of Kamma is that if there's anything that you don't particularly care for about what's going on in your life and you would prefer not to happen, all you need to do is cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you will experience different results. But if it's destiny or fate, or if it's good luck or bad luck, or if it's God that's controlling what you experience, or if it's other people that are controlling what you experience, you have no ability to change that. So learning the natural law of Kamma, it really empowers you, because now if there's anything you don't particularly care for in your life, you cultivate wisdom, you make different decisions, and you will experience different results. So as we go in our class today, I'm going to help you to understand this natural law, and you're able to ask any and all questions that you like. You can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section, and I'll be able to see that and answer your question for you. If you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and unmute your microphone, and then you can ask any and all questions that you like. I'll be able to hear you, and other people will be able to hear you as well. So welcome again to our class today. When you're learning this path to enlightenment, you're learning about all these natural laws. Everything the Buddha taught is the natural laws of existence. He's explaining to you the way the world is. He's not explaining to you the way the world should be, and that if you believe a bunch of things, then wonderful things will happen to you when you die. He's explaining to you the way the world is. And this natural law of Kamma is affecting you whether you're aware of it or not. So when you awaken to the wisdom of this natural law, you'll be able to navigate the world more peacefully. When you're having anger and sadness and frustration or annoyment or other discontent feelings, this is the mind struggling in a world that it doesn't understand. And what it's not understanding is this natural law. If you think back to when you didn't understand the natural law of gravity, you struggled with that too, just like all of us did. We fell down, we hit our head, we bumped our elbows, we broke open our knees, or broke our toys. We had all kinds of problems, and we cried and we were upset about this because we lacked wisdom of this natural law of gravity, and therefore we made unwise decisions inadvertently. And even though we didn't know about this natural law at the age of 2 or 3 or 4, it still affected us whether we were aware of it or not. So this natural law of Kamma is the same thing. Just like with the natural law of gravity, when we awoke into the wisdom of that natural law, we were able to make wiser decisions. We climb ladders, we ride bicycles and motorbikes, we get on airplanes and travel all over the world. That's because we now understand this natural law. We fully awoke to the natural law of gravity, and that means that we have wisdom of it. And now we can make decisions more wisely about this natural law and how we interact in the world based on this natural law. Well, the same thing needs to occur with this natural law of Kamma. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out with teaching you about what is Kamma and helping you to understand this natural law from a high level. And then we're going to go into detail and talk about it in more detail. So essentially what the natural law of Kamma is that it's a natural law that's functioning at every moment at all times, whether you're aware of this natural law or not. And everything that the Buddha taught in one way or another is coming back to this natural law. What this natural law of Kamma is cause and effect, or action and result. It's the results of your decisions. Again, it's nothing mystical or magical. If this word Kamma translated to just one English word, I would use it because it's easier for everyone. But it doesn't translate to just one English word, so I still need to use this word Kamma. And what it means is cause and effect, or action and result, the results of your decisions. When you make decisions wisely or unwisely, you're going to experience the results of that. You're going to experience the consequences. And now, if you cultivate wisdom about this natural law, you'll be able to make wiser and wiser decisions. And now your mind is fully awake to this natural law, and you can navigate the world very peacefully. So this natural law, it's the results of your decisions, and it's affecting every being, whether they're aware of this natural law or not. There is no being or entity that oversees the functioning of this natural law. You're experiencing the results of this natural law based on your intentions, your speech, and your actions. When you put out certain things in the world, you're going to experience the return of that. And I'm going to explain to you in more detail about what that is. It's important to understand that the natural law of Kamma is not a system of punishments and rewards. Sometimes people think that way. It's also not about who's to blame or who's at fault. That's not what the teachings are. It's not what the natural law of Kamma is. It's also not anything mystical or magical. I've even heard some people say that the natural law of Kamma is like a bank account where you make deposits into it. And then if you deposit enough, you can actually start making withdrawals and start doing unwholesome things. And this will all balance itself out. This isn't actually true. This isn't what the natural law of Kamma is. So I'm going to help you to understand this by demystifying it for you so that you can understand it. And we're going to start that with just understanding some of the words of the Buddha. These are the words of the Buddha on some aspects of the natural law of Kamma. Now, as I mentioned, everything the Buddha taught in one way or another is teaching about the natural law of Kamma. But here, these are two important points that you need to be able to understand as you're starting to make your way into understanding the natural law of Kamma. So I'll read these to you, and then I'll help you to understand. The Buddha teaches very clear and very concise, but it helps to have a dedicated practitioner and teacher to guide you along here. So here the Buddha says, beings are the owners of their Kamma, the heirs of their Kamma. They have Kamma as their origin, Kamma as their relative, Kamma as their resort. Whatever Kamma they do, wholesome or unwholesome, they are its heirs. What he's saying here is you're the one who's creating your own Kamma. Other people can't create Kamma for you. So if you've ever been around a situation where someone's like, oh, don't rub your bad Kamma off on me, or don't put your unwholesome Kamma on me, this isn't actually possible. It's only your decisions that are leading to any particular result. You are the heirs of your Kamma. It's your decisions that lead to any particular result that you're experiencing. It's not possible for other people to make decisions that lead to your Kamma. The result of Kamma, I say, is threefold: to be experienced in this very life, or in the next rebirth, or on some subsequent occasion. Here the Buddha is saying you can't run and hide from your Kamma. You're going to experience it either in this life, the next life, or some future life after that. Now, as you guys have heard me say many times, is there's nothing to believe in the teachings of the Buddha. The natural law of Kamma isn't something to believe. You can learn it and understand it and independently verify it for yourself and see the truth. And you can practice, and now you can see the truth. And the same thing is true about the cycle of rebirth. You can independently verify this. Right now, you might not have that wisdom, but ultimately you can get to the point where you independently verify this cycle of rebirth, and you'll know with 100% certainty that it's actually true. I don't suggest people do that right up front in their journey to enlightenment, but it is something that you can accomplish. In volume 11, chapters 105, that's where I actually share 17 different criteria that you can use in order to independently verify the cycle of rebirth. But it's in volume 11, chapter 105 for a reason, because it's not something that you normally approach right up front. But just understand the teachings of the Buddha have this aspect to it, because this is the way that the world works. This is the way the world functions. And he's explaining to you the way the world is. And the fact is that we've all been reborn countless times in the past. And if we don't get to enlightenment, we will experience rebirth in the future. But if you extinguish your unwholesome Kamma in this life, there isn't going to be a rebirth because the mind will actually be enlightened. So here, these are two important points from the Buddha. In addition to everything else that he talks about with the natural law of Kamma, he's explaining that it's you that creates all your Kamma, and you can't run and hide from it. So once you come to that understanding, to understand that you create your own karma and you can't run and hide from it, either wholesome or unwholesome, then the next question becomes, well, if that's the case, let me learn as much as I can learn about this natural law so that you can make wise decisions and experience more and more improved results. So that's what I'm going to do with you here today, is help you to understand the 4 different types of karma that you need to understand in order to be able to make your way to enlightenment. There's wholesome karma and unwholesome karma. There's old karma and there's new karma. I'm going to explain this to you, what it is, and then I'll give you some examples. And then, of course, you're going to have opportunity to ask any and all questions that you like. So what wholesome karma is this is the results of your decisions whenever you're making decisions that are harmless. When you're not causing harm to other beings, this is going to produce wholesome results or wholesome karma. But when you're making decisions that is harmful to other beings, this is going to produce unwholesome karma, or this unwholesome results. So when you're causing harm to yourself, to others, or both, you're going to experience unwholesome karma or unwholesome results. So the wholesome karma is harmless decisions, and harmful decisions is going to produce unwholesome karma or unwholesome results. Then there's something called old karma and new karma. What old karma is any decisions that you've made in the past that you're now experiencing the results of in the present moment. Then in the present moment, whatever decisions you're making now, this is producing new karma. You're going to be now experiencing that new karma in the future. So old karma is anything that's coming back to you from the past. New karma is any decisions you're making now that you're going to experience the results of in the future. So let me give you an example of this. Say in the past, you lied on your tax forms with your government, and this was maybe 3 years ago, and now you're getting a notice in the mail that says you owe them $3,000, $1,000 for the original amount, $1,000 interest, and $1,000 penalty. This is your old unwholesome karma, because I did something unwise. I lied in the past on my tax forms, and now in the present moment, I'm experiencing this old unwholesome karma. And in the present moment, I have decisions to make, what I do in this situation. And if I don't know these teachings, I might actually try to run and hide from this. I might try to do something that would be unwise. Maybe I rip up this paper and I throw it away. That's not going to fix this issue. Or maybe I call up the government or write them a letter and I'm bitter and harsh and hostile and vindictive to them. And this isn't going to solve the problem either. Or maybe I call them up and start lying to them some more, right? This isn't going to solve the issue either. I'm now in the present moment creating new unwholesome karma. Where I've gotten this old unwholesome karma coming back to me, I now have the ability to make new decisions, but because of my lack of wisdom of these natural laws, I'm making new decisions that is producing unwholesome karma. But when you get this old unwholesome karma coming back to you with wisdom of this natural law, you can actually make new decisions that is producing wholesome karma. You can extinguish this old unwholesome karma. And what I might decide to do is I might call up the government or write them a letter. I might apologize for this oversight and what's happened here. And now I take full responsibility for this, and I let them know that I would like to solve this issue, but I don't have $3,000. But I'm so polite and I'm so kind and friendly with them, maybe they decide to drop off the penalty and drop off the interest. And they say, hey, you only owe us $1,000. Well, maybe I don't even have that money. And maybe I'm polite with them further and I have a further discussion with them. And now they say, you know what? How about a payment plan? We can work out a payment plan for you where you can pay this over time. And now in the present moment, I've created new karma that is wholesome. And I'm going to ultimately get to a point where I extinguish this old unwholesome karma because I've made new wholesome karma, where I've made new decisions that is producing wholesome results for me. I'm polite, I'm kind, I'm friendly, I'm taking responsibility for this. I'm trying to figure out how to solve this. And now this is going to extinguish this. So these are the 4 different types of karma. There's wholesome karma, that is any harmless decisions that you're making. Then there's unwholesome karma, which is any harmful decisions that you're making. Then you've got old karma, which is decisions from the past that you've made that you're experiencing the results of now. And then you've got new karma, which is any decisions you're making now that you'll experience the results of in the future. Now, I'd like to talk about harm for a little bit. Because if you've been studying with me for any amount of time, you've learned that you can't cause any other being discontentedness. Just like you cause your own discontentedness, your own anger, frustration, agitation, annoyance, you cause that yourself. You can independently verify that through the Four Noble Truths. Then you've learned that about not only your mind, but also other people too. If your husband or wife or your brothers or sisters or your mom or dad or boss or coworkers, if they're getting angry and frustrated and irritated, you're not causing that. You're not causing that discontentedness, but you can cause people harm. What harm is where you're causing harm to someone's material possessions, where you cause harm to their physical body, like a physical injury, or you cause harm to their reputation. These kinds of things are harms that you can cause to other beings. And whenever you cause harm to others, this harm will come back to you because of the natural law of Kamma. So you would like to get to a point where you're not causing any harm whatsoever, that you're practicing harmlessness. Okay, so now I'm going to share with you some words of the Buddha where he's teaching you about how you produce wholesome Kamma and unwholesome Kamma. And it's connected to what I taught last week. Last week, we studied the three poisons, or the three unwholesome roots, or the three fires of craving, anger, and ignorance. That craving is where the mind is longing, yearning, and chasing after the objects of its affection, having selfish desires, that unquenchable thirst, forming its inner feelings based on this thing. And if you get what you want, you get happy. And if you don't get what you want, you get angry or sad or frustrated or some other painful feeling. There's pleasant feelings that come into the mind when the mind's cravings, desires, attachments are getting fulfilled, the wants and the expectations. But then there's painful feelings when the mind is getting the wants and longing, yearning, the craving, desire when it's not getting fulfilled. So that craving, that selfish desire, that chasing after the objects of your affection, whenever you're making decisions through that, it's going to produce unwholesome results. Because with the craving, the mind is self-centered and it just wants things to be self-pleasing for yourself. And now when that anger is arising, as the craving isn't getting fulfilled, the anger is arising. Now the mind is bitter and harsh and hostile. It has animosity and resentfulness towards others. There's ill will that comes out through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. And now with the mind acting unskillfully, now that's producing unwholesome results in your day-to-day life. And as you guys have learned, you can independently verify the things that I'm sharing with you. You can look at your life and you can see that whenever you've been bitter and harsh and hostile and angry, it's produced unwholesome results for you. Maybe you've had broken relationships. Maybe you've lost jobs or things like this. This is all because of the unwise decisions that was being made through craving and anger. And the thing that's keeping all of this in place is this third one, which is the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality, the lack of wisdom, the confusion. When the mind is making decisions through that, it's going to produce unwholesome Kamma or unwholesome results. So whenever the mind lacks wisdom of these natural laws, it's functioning through this unknowing of true reality, the lack of wisdom, because it doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. So whenever the mind is making decisions through those cravings, that selfish desires, that anger, hatred, and ill will, that ignorance or unknowing of true reality, it's going to produce unwholesome results. It's producing unwholesome Kamma. And you can see this in your life, that whenever you experience any unwholesome results in your life or unwholesome Kamma, it's coming from your craving, your anger, and your ignorance. And remember, there's a whole spectrum here. The cravings can be very simple, very light. Even those are going to produce unwholesome results, but they can also be very strong and more deeply held. And the same thing with this anger. You can have just a little slight annoyance or irritation all the way up to intense rage, right? And you can have certain natural laws that you just kind of smaller ones that you don't really kind of have awareness of, but then there can be bigger ones too that you need to learn and be able to understand. So there's a whole spectrum here. And that's why whatever you're experiencing is going to be either more significant or less significant based on the amount of craving, anger, and ignorance that's in the mind and that's into any particular decision that you make. But what you're doing on this path to enlightenment, as you guys have learned last week when I shared the solutions with you, is you're gradually bringing down your craving, anger, and ignorance. And what you're doing is you're getting rid of these unwholesome roots and you're arising these three wholesome roots. Because when you're making decisions through the wholesome routes, then you're going to be producing wholesome kamma, or wholesome results. Because the wholesome routes are the exact opposites of the unwholesome roots. Because the unwholesome root of craving is that selfish desires where the mind wants things to be self-pleasing. Well, the opposite of that is generosity, where the mind's giving and sharing more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return, such as your time, your effort, your energy, and your resources. You're living open-handedly, being joyful and letting go and sharing with others without any expectation of anything in return. That's the exact opposite of craving. Then the exact opposite of this anger and hostility is the loving kindness, this genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. And when you're practicing that through your intention, speech, and actions, it's going to produce wholesome kamma. Just like the generosity, these are going to produce wholesome results or wholesome kamma, because you're having this genuine interest in seeing all beings be well, this active goodwill towards others without judgment, where you're not judging others to determine whether they deserve your loving kindness, but instead you're just practicing loving kindness with all beings. This is unconditional love. We're going to be talking about this even more when we get to chapter 15 of our book series. So here with the generosity and loving kindness, this is helping to bring down the craving and anger. And when you're making decisions through these two wholesome roots, it's going to produce wholesome results for you. And where all of this is coming from is the exact opposite of the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. It's coming from the wisdom of the natural laws. That's the exact opposite of that unknowing or that confusion or misunderstanding or misperception, that you cultivate wisdom. And this is why you've been guided all the way from the beginning to never believe anything at all about the teachings of the Buddha or any other aspect of the path or any other aspect of life. You would like to be able to know the truth for yourself. By knowing the truth, now you'll actually have wisdom. And the way you get to that is through not believing. Because with belief, you don't know what's true or false. Either someone convinced you to believe it, or you convinced yourself to believe it. You would like to get to the point where you've deeply investigated and examined each individual aspect of these teachings, that you've reflected on it to independently verify it, and that you're practicing the teachings, integrating them into your day-to-day life so that you can actually see the truth. And you've cultivated wisdom to now be able to know with 100% certainty what are these natural laws and how to practice them in your day-to-day life. And this is what's going to lead to your enlightenment. And this is what's going to lead to more and more production of wholesome kamma. So I'm going to pause right here for a moment and see if you guys have any questions. If you have questions, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section. I'll be able to see that and answer your question. Or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions by unmuting your microphone. So let me know what questions, if any, that you guys have. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So let me go a bit further into this, because once you understand the four types of kamma, of wholesome kamma and unwholesome kamma, and old kamma and new kamma, what you would like to do is you would like to learn how to extinguish all your unwholesome kamma. As you have old unwholesome kamma coming back to you, you would like to extinguish this. You'd like to bury it. And I've already been teaching you how to do this, but now let me explain it to you in detail based on something that I've already taught you. It's the Eightfold Path. Back to chapter 4 and 5 of this group learning program, I was teaching you the path to enlightenment. And I was teaching you things like right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. These are 8 individual factors that you learn through the original words of the Buddha about how to produce wise decisions that are going to lead to wholesome results or wholesome kamma. So when you're experiencing any particular things in your day-to-day life, you would like to now be making decisions through the Eightfold Path, through all your interactions, through all your relationships, through any kind of old unwholesome kamma that's coming back to you. You would like to now use these teachings to start thinking and pondering about what it is that you're encountering on a day-to-day basis, and now apply these teachings to be able to extinguish this old unwholesome kamma coming back to you. When you start dialing in this Eightfold Path closer and closer, and you're now applying it to your day-to-day life, you'll be able to now extinguish your old unwholesome karma. And you'll be able to get to the point where you're only making wise decisions, and that is producing wholesome karma. So an analogy that I use to help you understand this is you can think about like a garden hose. If you think about our life in the past, we were making unwise decisions. We were off the path to enlightenment. We don't even know these teachings. We don't even know they exist. We might not even know anything named the Buddha, right? And we're out there making all kinds of unwise decisions about various things that we're doing in life. This is like taking a garden hose and packing it with mud. And we're shoving all this mud into the garden hose. And now we've got all this old unwholesome karma in our garden hose because we've been packing mud into it. But now if you're getting on the path to enlightenment, you might have decided that you're going to hook this garden hose up to a faucet. And now you're going to open up the faucet and start getting some clean water going into this garden hose. That's your wise decisions going into the garden hose. Well, if you open up this faucet where you've got a little drip going through this garden hose, like maybe you learn in a class like this once a month or once every 2 or 3 months, or maybe you're meditating once a week or something like this, you've got a little drip coming through this garden hose, and you're not going to be able to clean that out in this lifetime. But if you're regularly coming to classes, if you're reading books, if you're consulting with a teacher, if you're doing regular meditation on a daily basis and all the other things that you need to do in order to be able to build up your practice, well, now you've just opened up that faucet really wide and you've got this gushing water coming through this garden hose. But when you first start putting this water into this garden hose, you're going to be getting some mud coming out of this garden hose. You have to experience that. You're not going to be able to run and hide from that. So this garden hose is going to spit mud for a period of time. And it's going to be mud and mud and mud and mud coming out of this garden hose. But then eventually you're going to see some clean water coming out of this garden hose. But then you're going to get some more mud and some more mud and some more mud. But now you're going to get clean water. But now it's more mud and more mud. But then it's going to be clean water. But then it's going to be more mud. But then it's going to be clean water. And now maybe a little bit of mud. But then it's going to be clean water and clean water and clean water. And the more wise decisions that you put into your life through the Eightfold Path, the more water you've got coming through this garden hose. And you're going to ultimately clean it out where you have nothing but clean water coming out of this garden hose. And that's what you're actually aiming for, and that's what you're working towards. But you need to cultivate wisdom, and you need to be able to train your mind to gradually reduce these craving, anger, and ignorance. And that's why you're doing things like meditation, and you're learning all the other factors of the Eightfold Path to gradually bring down craving, anger, and ignorance out of the mind. And you're gradually increasing the generosity, the loving kindness, and the wisdom to be able to make wiser and wiser decisions in your day-to-day life. So I'm going to give you an example from my life so that you can see how this works. When I was growing up as a child, I had a certain amount of hostility and bitterness in my mind because that's what I grew up around. I grew up in a harsh family. Maybe some of you guys grew up in that kind of family too, where there was yelling and hollering and, people were arguing and bickering with each other and all these kinds of things, right? So I had that in my mind. I grew up with that kind of environment and atmosphere. There was all kinds of difficult and challenging things going on in my childhood. Well, as I aged, I was polite and respectful to a certain degree, but in certain situations, I could be quite bitter and quite harsh. And when I met my current wife, who I've been together with for 17 years, initially, of course, we're in the honeymoon phase, right? We're all on our best behavior. I was putting on a good act, but over time, things kind of start falling away, and I started being bitter and harsh and hostile in our relationship at different times, right? And over time, I noticed that she started being that way too, right? So after about 11 years of this, I started to do something different. I decided I was going to get on this path and I was really going to transform my mind. And I was tired of not only the 11 years with her, but all the other difficulties and challenges that I had all throughout my life. I was tired of all of that and I wanted to transform it. So after about the 11-year mark with my wife, I decided to start changing, and I did things very differently. I started practicing these teachings very closely. But because I had been bitter and harsh and hostile in the past, I had to experience that she was being bitter and harsh and hostile with me. So there were times where I would come home from work, or I'd come home from what I was doing, and as soon as I'd walk in the door, she'd start yelling and hollering at me for something. Or we'd be, eating a meal together, and she'd start yelling and hollering at me about something. It was only a matter of time. Where what I would typically do in those situations in the old days is I would be bitter and harsh and hostile right back to her, right? And I would start yelling and hollering back, and it would just keep everything going. If she picked up the rubber ball of anger and hostility and threw it around the room, I picked up the rubber ball of anger and hostility and I threw it around the room. And next thing you know, we're throwing these balls around the room and we've got all these balls bouncing around. But now I started doing something different. When I walked in and she would be bitter and harsh and hostile with me, I would just choose to walk away. I didn't give that any energy. I didn't add any anger to that, where in the past I would have. But now, instead of picking up the rubber ball and throwing it back at her, I decided to just let that rubber ball lose its energy and roll to the corner. And now I would just walk away, right? And in some cases, I would sit there and let her yell and holler at me. And after she was done, I would say, "Thank you, dear. Sawadee kap. I love you." And I would why her and walk away. Other times I had more control of my mind and she would be yelling and hollering at me and telling me how horrible of a husband I was. And I would say, "Yep, you're right. I was. I did all those things. You're 100% right. I was so unwise. I was making really unwise decisions, but I'm not doing that anymore." Right? And she started to realize that her husband was now being calm and friendly and polite and respectful, and I wasn't adding any anger and hostility in this relationship. So it took 1.5 years of me walking away, or "Thank you, dear," and I would why her and I'd walk away. "I love you," right? And I had to experience this unwholesome kamma for 1.5 years, but you could see that it was slowly tapering off. And eventually, we got to a point where she doesn't do that at all anymore. It's probably been 5 years since I've heard anything like that from her. So while we've been together for 17 years, but we've only been happily together for about 5 years, right? So you guys might be experiencing that kind of thing where you're in a particular relationship and it has a lot of challenges, but you can get to a point where you're happily together, where we don't argue, we're not upset with each other. In the past, we used to fight until death, right? If there was something I wanted and there was something she wanted, we would fight to death. I had to prove I was right and she had to prove that she was right. Where now we do something different. We sit down and we have discussions and we talk, and she discusses her ideas and her thoughts, and I discuss my ideas and my thoughts, and we come to some conclusion about what it is that we would like to do in our day-to-day life. And sometimes we still don't agree, and we just agree to disagree, and she might do things her way and I'll do things my way, and that's completely fine, right? Where at the past we would fight until death. So now we've learned other skills and other techniques to be able to sit and talk and discuss, and now there's no arguments or hostility between the two of us. But then I noticed there was some more unwholesome kamma that I needed to extinguish in this relationship with my wife. That I noticed that my son, at the early age of 6, was starting to be bitter and harsh and hostile to his mom. He had learned this from me because he saw me doing this. So not only did I need to teach my wife and spend time there and extinguish that, but I also needed to help my son to understand the path to enlightenment and understand how this was harmful in his relationship with his mom. And while he had seen me do those things in the past, I'm not doing those things anymore, and it's unwise for him to do that. And it took time for him and his mom to work out this relationship where they now improved and got to the point where they weren't being bitter and harsh and hostile to each other. So there are certain relationships that you have right now that maybe there's hostility and bitterness in them. And the best way for you to clean them up is to just walk away from them. That you're not committed to the relationship and there's too much hostility and bitterness on your side and or their side, and you're just not committed to cleaning it up, and it would be better to just walk away. You don't have to tell the person that that's what you're doing. You don't have to download all the reasons why you're choosing to walk away. You can just gradually put more and more distance between you and that person, where if you normally write back to their text messages or their messages more quickly, you can just kind of put more and more distance between that and gradually allow your mind to move on and allow their mind to move on. That's what you can do with some relationships. But then there's other relationships that you might be more committed to, and you guys are having difficulties and challenges to some extent. And maybe you need to work on your mind and improve the condition of your mind so that now you can be involved in this relationship in a more healthy way. Because sometimes in these relationships that are problematic, that we're committed to, we really want the other person to change. I tell you, I wanted my wife to change so bad. And also with my mom, I really wanted them to change so bad. But that never produced any beneficial result. What I needed to do in order to create change in my life is I needed to choose to change. And when I chose to change, and I actually instituted this change, then the people around me started to change. So you can sit around all day wanting other people to change, but this isn't going to improve your life. You need to take charge of your own life. And now by you creating change within your own mind through training your mind, you can now create change in your relationships. So there's going to be some relationships that you're more committed to. Maybe a life partner, maybe your parents, brothers and sisters, and people like this. And you would like to work on your mind, and you're going to work on this relationship. And over time, you're going to be able to extinguish all your old unwholesome karma that's coming back to you. But then there's a third category of relationships. Brand new people that you haven't even met yet. You don't even know who they are right now. You don't know their names. And in those situations, when you meet those people, you're only going to be practicing generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. And now, because you're only making wholesome decisions and wise decisions, you're practicing harmlessness. That's all you're ever going to experience back in those relationships. Those relationships still are not permanent, but nonetheless, you're not going to be causing any harm in these relationships. So there isn't going to be any harm that's coming back to you. So these are the three categories of relationships. Some that you need to let go of, and that's the way that you're going to clean that up. There's some that you're going to improve the condition of your mind, and then you're going to improve the relationship. And then there's brand new relationships that you haven't even created yet. And you'll only ever be loving and kind in those relationships. And now, at the end of all of this, you'll have nothing but harmonious relationships in your life. By the time you get to enlightenment, you have harmonious relationships with every single person around you. You don't have any kind of bitterness and hostility and harshness in your relationships around you. You'll see that everybody in your life around you, you're only choosing to be in relationships where you are being harmonious in those relationships. And this is why it's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. You can't just snap your fingers and instantly get to enlightenment. You're going to need to gradually train your mind throughout multiple months and years to be able to improve the condition of your mind. And by doing so, you're now going to be making wiser and wiser decisions in your relationships, and you'll experience improved results in your relationships. So whenever you're experiencing old unwholesome karma coming back to you, you need to realize that now whatever decisions you make, you're going to be producing new karma, and you would like that new karma to be wholesome. And this is why that it would be unwise to hurry up and make a bunch of decisions. If you're ever noticing that the mind's trying to hurry up and make a bunch of decisions, just slow down and take your time and think through your decisions, because any decision that you put into the world, it's going to come back to you. And you need to be sure that whatever you put out into the world, that it's a wise decision. So whenever things feel like they're moving really fast in your life, just slow down, slow down, slow down. You can make those decisions more slowly, and you'll make them more wisely, and they're going to produce more wholesome results for you. That way, you don't have to produce unwholesome karma that is new, because now you're going to have to extinguish that in the future. So while we're talking about extinguishing this old unwholesome karma, the fact of the matter is that right now you still have craving, anger, and ignorance in your mind. Even if you tried to snap your fingers right now and practice these teachings perfectly, you wouldn't be able to do that. So over the coming weeks and months, you're still going to be making some unwise decisions in some situations, but you'd like to minimize that more and more by training your mind, bringing down the craving, anger, and ignorance. So you're still putting mud into your garden hose. But when you get to the point where your mind's fully purified and you're no longer putting in the mud into your garden hose, you're still going to be needing to experience the unwholesome results coming back to you. So now when these unwholesome results are coming back to you with that more fully purified mind, you'll be making wiser and wiser decisions to extinguish this. And this is why it's gradual training, gradual practice and gradual progress. It's not hurry up and get to enlightenment. Nobody's ever hurried up and got to enlightenment. There's no shortcuts. So you're going to need to take your time and gradually work towards it. So let me pause here and see if you guys have any questions on extinguishing your old unwholesome kamma by creating new kamma that is wholesome, making wise decisions. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, it looks like Fiona has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Oh, hello. Can you hear me?
I sure can.
That's good. So yesterday I put some mud in my garden hose. What happened was I was with a close family member and they were talking about a subject matter that I was finding very disagreeable. And suddenly, from my subconscious, I suddenly said, "Shut up." And not very harshly, but it just came out without thinking. And then I realised straight away that I shouldn't have done that because that's not very wise. And later on, I did apologise and invited them to Sunday lunch today. And they were fine and said sorry that they shouldn't have been discussing the subject that they were, and they wouldn't do it again. But I'm wondering how I should have handled it, because I've been reflecting on it. And I'm wondering whether I should have said, "Oh, can we change the subject? Or could you not discuss that in my presence because I'm uncomfortable with that?" Or how I should have dealt with it.
Sure. So since you did do something that was unwise, and that's great that you saw that and you took responsibility for it and you apologized for it, that's exactly how you cleaned it up. You kind of jumped on it right away to be able to clean it up right away. And that's very wise. That's what you would like to do. The Buddha teaches you that before you do something, while you're doing something, and after you do something, you should reflect on, is this causing harm to myself? Is it causing harm to others? Or is it causing harm to both? And at any point in time, if you notice that you're causing harm, either before doing something, while doing something, or after doing something, you should refrain from doing this particular thing. Cultivate the wisdom to know that it would be unwise to do that in the future. So you've handled that part of it, the cleaning up part, pretty well. And that's great that you're doing that. But in the future, if this kind of thing happens, you're not interested in doing what you're thinking, which is asking this person to stop talking about something, because that's not actually going to solve the problem. That's the mind putting expectations on somebody. That's trying to control what somebody else does. What you got to do is you got to maintain the decision making for yourself of what you're experiencing. So in this kind of situation, if you're hearing something that you would prefer not to hear, it's better to just stand up and just walk away and go somewhere else. Go wash your hands in the bathroom, go do something else, and then come back 5, 10, 15 minutes later. Or you could change the subject. Don't ask somebody else to change it. You just bring up a topic and you start talking about this other topic, or ask questions. Asking someone questions, now they're going to need to talk about something else. So rather than telling somebody what to do, you can just ask questions about some other topic, and now they're going to reply to you about that other topic. And now you've effectively maintained the control by making a decision to change the topic or get up and walk away. And these are decisions that you can make rather than trying to impose what you want other people to do.
Oh, thank you. That's really helpful.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So let me go to this next piece to be able to help you guys understand. And this is the last thing to share with you guys on this particular topic of introducing you to what is Kamma and how does it affect me. And this is about laws of society. Now, sometimes when people hear me teach the natural law of Kamma, and I teach that you can't run and hide from your Kamma, someone might say, hold on a second, teacher. Hold on. Let me ask you a question. What about that person who their bloody footprint was at the murder scene, their car was full of blood, the murder weapon was under their bed, and they went to court and they were found not guilty? Didn't they run and hide from their Kamma? The answer is no, they haven't run and hid from their kamma. What they're experiencing is the laws of society. They're not in that situation. That is part of the natural law of kamma, but it's not 100% the natural law of kamma. Sometimes people think the laws of society is 100% the natural law of kamma, but there's other aspects to this natural law that someone's not seeing. The human laws, the laws of society, these are imperfect because they're created, administered, and enforced by human beings. And human beings are prone to error. They tend to be making decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance. So therefore, they're not going to be able to enforce these laws and administer them fairly amongst all beings. Now, we should always aspire to make that better and better and get to the point where we are doing that better and better. But the fact of the matter is that as long as human beings are involved, we're going to be experiencing the results of our decisions, which is the errors that we're prone to. So you can have somebody that experiences this particular court case in different ways, and you can have someone that goes to court with all of these things that I just shared and is found not guilty. But you don't have to get angry or upset about that, because that person is experiencing their kamma. It's just that you may not be there when they're experiencing it, because there's more than just going to jail, which is part of this person's kamma. So for example, this person now having been in the news and people know about all this information, they're going to experience a bad reputation in the community. They're going to potentially experience sickness and disease, physical and mental pain, a shortened lifespan. And the way that this kind of thing is happening is it's nothing mystical and magical, but when you have enough craving and anger in your mind to kill someone, to kill a human being, that's going to produce a certain amount of stress and anxiety in your mind, a certain amount of bitterness and hostility and guilt and shame and fear. And now that's going to put stress on the organs, the heart, the lungs, the other organs, and this person's lifespan is going to be a bit shorter than anybody else, that they're going to notice this shorter lifespan. And then there's also this hostility and aggression and fights and even being killed themselves. So it's not like in this one relationship they were having problems and they ended up killing this person, and then in all of the rest of the relationships they're going perfectly. This isn't the case. If someone had enough anger and hostility to kill this individual, their other relationships are having difficulties too. So they're experiencing these fights and hostility and aggression, and this is all putting strain on the mind and on the body. So this individual is experiencing that. They're also experiencing a loss of income or wealth, because to go off into court and defend yourself on a murder charge, there's going to be a lot of loss of wealth and income that you're going to have as a result of that. You're going to notice that this individual is going to have difficulties in their other relationships as well. Like I mentioned, they're going to have other challenges in their other relationships. They're going to have difficulty securing and progressing in employment. They're going to have difficulty securing housing, acquiring necessities to sustain life. These are all things that is the results of their decisions. Because they made decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, it's producing unwholesome kamma for them. And these are all results of their decisions that they're going to experience. And even discontentedness in rebirth itself. So if an individual is experiencing stress or anxiety or guilt or shame or fear as a result of having killed another human being, this is the results of their decisions. That is their kamma. And they'll experience potentially rebirth into another life, that if they didn't get to enlightenment in this life, they will experience rebirth. And there's different ways that they can experience rebirth in either a favorable or unfavorable situation. So this person hasn't actually escaped anything at all. It's just that they were found not guilty in this particular court case. And not only can you experience those kinds of things, but you can experience people going off to a court of law and be found guilty when they were actually not guilty. So for example, I could be maybe in a gang as I'm growing up, 18, 20, 22 years old. Maybe I'm on the street corner selling drugs. Maybe I'm murdering people and doing different things like this. And now I've decided at the age of 25 to get away from this gang. And now it's been a year or two that I've been away from this particular gang. But now let's just say something happens in the community and somehow it gets pinned on me and I get arrested for this. So in the past, I didn't get arrested for any of those things that I did, and I didn't go to jail or anything. But now that I've gotten away from the gang for a year or two, somehow this gets pinned on me and I go to court and I'm not the one who did this murder, but I get found guilty, even though I was not guilty in this particular case. And now I'm going off into the jail system to experience the results of my decisions, of having done all these unwise things in the past. So you're going to experience your Kamma, and other people are experiencing their Kamma too. And what you would like to do is get to the point where you're extinguishing all the old unwholesome Kamma by creating new Kamma that is wholesome. And whenever you experience the creation of unwholesome Kamma or the old unwholesome Kamma coming back to you, you would like to look at how to extinguish it. And that's what Fiona gave a great example of, is she realized after she had done something, oh my goodness, this was unwholesome Kamma. I need to extinguish this. So an apology in that situation was wonderful. Inviting them out to eat is wonderful. This is showing generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. Where when you said, shut up, you were functioning through craving, through anger, and through ignorance. And it was probably irritation or frustration or annoyment, but nonetheless, it's coming from the same place. But now you've converted that. You're transforming that. You're now practicing generosity, inviting them out to dinner or to lunch or what have you. You're practicing loving kindness, where you have a genuine interest in seeing this being be well. And that's coming from your wisdom. And now you're going to be able to transform your mind, and you're going to be able to extinguish this old unwholesome Kamma, and you're jumping on it right away, which is ideal. You're not interested in that lingering. And then more and more, you'll get used to just not saying those kinds of things at all, because your mind will be much better trained. So let me know what questions you guys have here. This is everything that I have to share with you guys on this topic. And I'd like to just give you guys a final opportunity to ask any and all questions related to any aspect of the natural law of Kamma. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, it looks like Joe has a question. Go ahead, sir.
Hello. My question is pretty simple. So, like in your example with your wife, let's say you practiced 11 years and you weren't, it wasn't wholesome behavior, and and you were able to recover in, let's say, a year and a half is what you said. What if it took you 11 years to recover, or to come back from that unwholesome Kamma that you had built up? So I guess my question is there like a limit? Like, when do you sort of, I don't know, you realize, I guess, it's not, good Kamma isn't going to come back to you from that person, so maybe you just let it go, you know what I mean?
Yes.
I'm not sure if that's clear.
Yeah, I think you're trying to say, how do you determine whether to move on from the relationship or stay in the relationship and repair it? Yeah, this is a decision that you have to make on a case-by-case basis. Nobody can tell you in what situation you should do what. It really comes down to your level of commitment and whether you think that there's an ability for you to improve this relationship. The reason why we were able to improve our relationship is because not only was I committed to doing the work, she was too, because she was on the path. And this is what I advise people, is if you're going to have a life partner, it's wonderful if you have someone who's also on the path. Doesn't mean you can't get to enlightenment if that's not the case, but if you have a partner that's on the path, it just makes things so much better, because with you having wisdom about this path and them having wisdom, you can extinguish it pretty quickly. So a year and a half, that was actually quite quick, considering that I had spent 11 years producing unwholesome Kamma in this situation. So the more wisdom that you have about the path, the more you'll be able to extinguish this. Because one of the things that I knew is that my wife's anger was coming from her craving, her anger, and her ignorance, and she had to extinguish it. And it was like a fire. So that's why after I started gaining more and more control over my mind, when she would be yelling and hollering and bitter at me, sometimes I would say, "Anything else, dear? Would you like to say anything else? Come on, get it all out. Let's go." Right? I was like, yeah, you're right. I was horrible. I did that. Yep, you're right. I sure did. I was a horrible husband. Anything else? And I would just kind of egg her on and try to get her to get it all out of her system and yell and holler. Sometimes I'd even get a pillow and I say, "Come on, punch it, right? I'm like, "Come on, show me how much you hated it," right? And I would just let her get it all out. And ultimately, this helped her to extinguish her anger. So the more wisdom you have about this path and understanding that this person has to extinguish their fires, then you can aid them in that. So even if your partner's not really on the path, because my wife, she's Thai and she considered herself Buddhist, but she actually didn't know the path. When I first started talking with her about the path, she didn't even know what an attachment was. She looked at me and she said, that bath towel is an attachment. And I said, no, it's not. That bath towel isn't an attachment. So I needed to help her to learn. And that was part of the wisdom that I cultivated, was how to help somebody. And this has aided me to be an actual teacher. So you're going to have to decide for yourself, Joe, in what situations you would like to end the relationship and just move on by just gradually moving away, or that you're more committed to the relationship. And if you're committed to the relationship, you're going to need to be committed to cultivation of wisdom within your own mind, and then skillfully helping this individual to extinguish their craving, anger, and ignorance in their mind as well.
Yeah, I'll keep cultivating wisdom then. Thank you.
That's the best thing you could ever do for your entire life. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So what I'm going to do is just end class by thanking all of you guys for joining. Thank you for being interested in learning the teachings of the Buddha. As you guys would like to learn more, I teach classes, as you guys probably know, Sunday and Wednesday, 9 a.m. Thai time from the temple, and 9 p.m. I'm usually teaching at home, but today I'm teaching from the temple. So Sundays and Wednesdays is our group learning program, and we go chapter by chapter in this book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. You can get this book from our website for free by downloading it. You can take it and go print it. You can get printed copies on Amazon if you have access to that. Or if you're here in Chiang Mai, you can come by the temple and you can get these by just reimbursing us for our printing cost. Next week, we're going to be in chapter 10, which is titled, What is Merit? This is a unique type of wholesome Kamma that you're going to need to understand what it is, because you're going to need to produce this in order to make your way to enlightenment. So I'm going to teach you guys about what merit is and how to actually create it. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to be doing loving kindness meditation with you guys in the evening time. So if you'd like to do loving kindness meditation, you're welcome to join, because what I'm doing now is I'm alternating between breathing mindfulness meditation and loving kindness, breathing mindfulness and loving kindness. Each Wednesday I'm doing that. And then I'm opening up to any and all questions that you guys have related to the path to enlightenment. So you can come to class and ask any random questions that you would like to help you to be able to make your way to enlightenment. So that's each Wednesday. And right now, I just started a retreat today where over the next 5 days, I'm teaching everything somebody needs to be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment. I just started that about 7 hours ago, Thai time, and I taught a 2-hour session. And you can see that on our YouTube channel or on Facebook where I've taught that. And then for the rest of this week, I'm going to be teaching 9 a.m. in the morning till 12:30 p.m. This is a 3.5 hour session. And then we're going to be going out and doing excursions. And then from 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. from here at the temple, I'm going to be teaching another class. So you can probably attend maybe some of these classes live if you're interested in learning this content, or you can watch the recordings because it's a playlist on our YouTube channel. You'll be able to see it there and in our Facebook group. So if you're interested in learning what you need to be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment, it's going to be in this retreat. And for some of you guys, you might just be completely fine with what you're learning in the group learning program, and that's enough for you. So you might just decide to stick with that. But if you're looking for more content, that would be an opportunity for you to do it, is through this retreat. So again, thank you all for joining. Thank you for everything you do to support the work that I'm doing, whether you're practicing generosity to help me do what I do. I really appreciate that. So thank you so much for everything that you do. And perhaps we'll see you guys in a future class. Be well and take care. Sawadee krap.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.